We are live. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to a Monday night. Let's get Instagram. How are you doing tonight, my dear?
I am good. I am good. Happy Monday and happy first day of summer Monday,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
this is the first summer Monday.
it is the
Say
first summer,
say that three times fast.
right? Yeah. I don't know about you, but our heat's been out of control already. So,
It's been warm here the last several days. We've had 100-degree temps and massive winds, so it doesn't take long to heat things up and dry things out.
right? Well, again, welcome everyone. Welcome YouTube. Welcome to our Facebook pages, our Instagram, Twitch, Rumble, and eventually we will be uploading these to our Heart Radio. Welcome, Apple Podcast and Spotify. Welcome. So I am Coach Sherri. I go by the handle Step by Healing Step on Instagram and Facebook. And this is my co-host. Uh, Coach Becky, which goes by I am Becky Niles. How's that for original, Becky?
There, there
Where
you
can they
go. For
find
anyone
you?
that did not know us,
Right.
yeah, I was just say pretty much any social media platform, right? Um, but yeah, for anyone that doesn't know us over here on YouTube, that is who we are. Twitch, you can always find more of our content on several of the other platforms. Facebook, Instagram are the primary two. I have TikTok, I have several others. In addition, most of the handles are all the same.
Absolutely. And then we put that underneath. So if you go back and watch any of our other recordings, you'll see all of our where you can find us on social media too. But yeah, so I was talking to Becky today and I said, "Hey Becky, let's talk about summer."
Yeah, which what more fitting than speaking to it in the beginning of it. You're right. We've been speaking about the Better Than Yesterday Summer Challenge. Well, hey, we're now in summer, right? So what's better than to discuss this wonderful summer light that we have, and how it can upgrade our biology in our bodies. So
Absolutely. So we just had summer solstice. We had the longest day. I don't know about you, but I was out almost to the bitter end of the daylight. How about you? That
yeah, pretty much all weekend. We're still
Yeah.
working on our deck. I think, knock on wood, we've have it pretty much done. It's been a process with only working on it on the weekends to get that done, but I think for the most part we are done. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of long days, early mornings, that type of thing, because we try to avoid the heat of the day, but it doesn't always work when you're trying to get things done. So
Well, you kind of said something just now. You said early mornings, and there's a method to that madness, right?
mhm. Yeah. With, looking at the early morning and the light and that whole side of it, right? So, one of the things I will end up and stop and say is a lot of the things that you're going to end up in here tonight, you're not going to hear from your doctor, your dietitian, or any of your favorite supplement companies. Um, we take a circadian approach and we take the approach that is going to be a natural approach. So, I'm not going to end up and sit here and say you need to take this or do that. I will just end up and give the information, and you do with it as you will as far as the light goes. But yeah, the morning sunlight is predominantly red light. So that helps with boosting the dopamine. It helps with the motivation, right? Getting out. It's one of the things I do. It's also the other reason why I love having plants and flowers and all of that on what we call the adult deck, because the kids have their side, we have our side. I can have flowers and not worry about them all being picked to death by kids. Um, but it gets me out. It gets me into that morning light because I go out and I water and all of that. Anchoring your body in morning sunlight and this intensity of higher intensity of red also helps to reset the circadian clock. So for those people that don't know, you have several hormones that are also circadian driven, and things like leptin, cortisol, melatonin. And many people don't realize, hey, if you're struggling with sleep, you might need to be out in the morning sunlight. But again, we'll get to that, and how, it helps with the production of melatonin when you get ready for sleep in the morning light. But also leptin. And leptin is one of the biggest circadian driven hormones as well. So yeah, that morning light, sunrise, getting that to support the brain, the gut, the hormones, that whole side of it.
Yeah, and of course, soaking up sunlight and supporting that vitamin D production, it plays a huge role in immune health, mood regulation,
Mhm.
even calcium absorption. Um, so that golden glow isn't, you know, it's a vibe, but it's actually changing your biology.
Which is so funny. You end up and you bring up the golden glow, right? Most
Yeah.
people end up and think of summer of going to the pool, going, maybe you're close to the beach. And
Hmm.
it's it's so funny because normally my daughter has always been one that is typically darker than me, and as far as a tan goes. But with just getting out and respecting the circadian side of things, I'm actually at this point of the season darker than what she is. And so we kind of chuckled the other day about that, because she's like, what, that's not fair. But again, getting out and supporting these pathways for the body is very important. Because again, a lot of your systems end up and rely on it. And so it's not just, how you end up and perceive summer, and you know, floating in a pool, or pool's great. It gets you outside, but it's also the ability to what you consume as far as food, how your body burns fat. A lot of people also don't realize that the light that we end up when we get during summer solstice can suppress your hunger. I can't tell you how many times, people are looking
Yeah.
towards pills, potions, and other things, right? To suppress that hunger, where in reality, sometimes if you just end up and get outside, and I'm not saying, that ends up and is the end all be all, right? But you can also raise your metabolic rate by getting out there. So it isn't just about what you eat, it's more about when you eat, how your brain perceives this energy. It's like the other, when we look at it from the smaller scale or the smaller level, food is a third, but energy, light, water, that whole side of things also ends up and is perceived into that. And so when we look at the leptin pathway, or the leptin melanocortin pathway, the brain has this natural fat burning side. So it doesn't want to hold on to weight. When we look at things in nature, when they are have inflammation, or they end up and are irritated, what happens? They swell. Our bodies are the same way. If you have weight loss resistance, that is your body is saying something isn't safe. And so it is holding on to everything that you have. It's not getting the messages that it needs as far as like the leptin goes. Again, I said, there's these four key hormones, and leptin it isn't just the satiety hormone that docks to the hypothalamus. That's one of the easiest ways to end up and describe it, is leptin docks to the hypothalamus at night. That's why you end up and you need sleep, right? But it's actually the messenger that communicates with your body's energy status and sends that signal to the brain. And during summer, when food is abundant, we are designed to thrive during this season. Sounds weird, but it kind of starts a cascade of things where leptin from the fat cells activates the POMC neurons in the hypothalamus, to these neurons then end up and produce the alpha MSH, which is it then ends up in buying, it starts this whole thing that signals to the brain, hey, we have energy, right? Let's turn up the metabolism. Let's get moving. Let's be active. Let's suppress the appetite and, go, go, go. And so it just, like I said, kind of starts this whole thing. And that's why the body ends up, and summer isn't also a season of cutting carbs. That's one of the things, a lot of people end up and do is go low carb, but nature has provided it where food is in abundance, right? And we should actually be opening that up, because our body also converts it differently with the ultraviolet, or with the UV index of light and the ultraviolet light. So it does end up and make a difference when we look at it from that standpoint.
Right. So seasonal eating supports cellular, I don't know the words. It supports the cell. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
So,
The ATP production.
yeah. So let's say that, berries, watermelon, mint, cucumbers, herbs, they're in season. Well, there's a reason they're in season. And when I, you, me, whatever, wherever your growing season is, when you consume that, your body knows that light source from what you're eating. Is that kind of the basis to that? I know that was simplistic, but I'll let you expand.
Yeah. So when we end up, when we look at seasonal eating and the way that the food grows under light, right? More daytime hours, more UV, more red, more infrared. It's for the body side of things. We'll start there. It supercharges the body and the mitochondria, the liver, the fat cells, the hypothalamus, all of this, into making the body more efficient at producing that energy or producing ATP. People like fancy terms, so we'll put the fancy terms in there. They, it ends up and it increases its ATP production. So the food needs to shift with the season to match, because food, the charge that we end up when we get from the food, no different than gaining the electrons from the earth when we're grounding, right? The food that we end up and is grown under this certain light exposure, the UVB exposure, it also increases the insulin sensitivity side, the carbohydrate tolerance. And so when we have, more of those carbs midday, eating things like you said, the fruit, the squashes, cucumbers, the carbs signal and align with summer's energy. So we're getting light through our eyes, we're getting light through our skin, but we're also getting that secondary signal, the Zeitgeber signal of the food sending the signal to the brain too. And so it's also the time where these hotter temps, higher UV, and we look at cellular water and how the body will end up and be able to produce some of the cellular water. And again, that's eating things like the berries, the cucumbers, these higher water rich foods to replenish. Now, before Instagram, before y'all come jumping at me, yes, these foods do end up and contain a molecule called deuterium. Deuterium is a hydrogen molecule, but there is a difference between hydrogen molecule and the isotope of the hydrogen molecule of deuterium and the hydrogen molecule that comes from like hydrogen rich water. Two different, one's a heavy isotope, one's a lighter isotope. One has benefit, one does not. But when we end up, and we also support the body's detox pathway through lymphatic movement, through sweating, through outdoors, like I said, sweating in the summer heat, that all helps the body to deplete itself of the deuterium. So sunlight and these foods will create a deeper hydration in structuring that water in the cell. You've probably heard us talk about exclusion zone water or easy water. That will end up and help with that as well. It'll also help with shuttling the minerals that our body needs. Minerals are the body's messenger that end
Yes.
up and get the signal essentially throughout the whole matrix of the body. And yes, your protein is important. Things like grass-fed meat, fish, eggs, all of that is important because again is providing the basis for the body, and then you end up with the other foods that are providing this leptin signaling, and looking at things that are going to be more local and seasonal. Because it's so funny, because I just had this conversation earlier in regards to someone that said, they were eating a mango. Well, your gut microbiome also is dependent and shaped based on your light environment. So when your light environment shapes the microbiome and the enzymatic activity, the local food grown under the same light is going to end up and prevent or create better digestion. So picking produce at, your farmer's market, that type of thing. Now, of course, yes, we can end up and get into, those that have higher antioxidants, those that have flavonoids, interact with the UV light to help, with like the internal sunscreen, supporting the mitochondria, that whole side of things. But even when my UV index is, for instance, we discussed the fact of it being 100 degrees this last weekend, the UV index was like 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, most areas, right, that are going to end up and have a UV index of 10 is going to have it repeatedly to end up and grow things like the mango or, whatever, bananas, etc. Not to say that I would never end up and have them. I'm human and I will end up and have things, occasionally. But to eat it repetitive is sending
Right.
a mixed signal. But it's also, we end up and when there's more foods grown, we need to end up and create more of a diversity to help with that microbiome. That is where, again, when I talk about food in abundance, having a variety, not just eating, meat and sauerkraut or chicken and green beans, create this diversity in what you're consuming. Maybe if your gut doesn't have the enzymatic and it doesn't have that diversity yet, start slow. I'm not saying, I told someone earlier today, end up and have 4 bites of something, right? Because they hadn't been consuming it. And I said, it doesn't have to be, the whole food. It can just end up and be a few bites. To end up and shift this digestion, and consuming that, like midday, helps with preventing it having this heavy food at night, so that your body is still able to get into that state of rest, and digest, because you don't want the body to have elevated insulin and elevated cortisol at night. You want to be able to get that deep sleep.
Mm. Mm.
So, there's this whole aspect, right? In getting bright color foods and getting, the way that it works with the body in summer solstice and times of light. But I'm not going to be consuming the same thing in June as what I consume in December. That food is going to end up and change as far as my vegetables and my fruit go.
Right.
Sure, some of those, like, for instance, we're working on getting Jason on, which has an olive oil company, and they have olives. Olives are a great fat source, but it's also something that can end up and is very low in, some of these anti-nutrients or the deuterium, right? And it can be consumed in other seasons. There's some things like resistant starches that can end up and be consumed in other seasons. So
Right.
it's more not overdoing things late at night, because your body needs, that light cue, but it also ends up and needs that digestive system cue that, hey, it's time to, wind down. So yeah, there's a whole thing in regards of like early morning light, the dopamine, the natural cortisol rise. That's another thing that you hear a lot on social media is, take this cortisol drink or do this to lower
Right.
cortisol. you know um Guess what? You can end up and eat protein and fats for breakfast. Um, and sure, the healthy fat can end up and be an avocado. And that can end up and help with the cortisol rise that you are naturally supposed to get, because that's
Right.
what wakes us up, right? Um, UV light. Now, one of the things that I have a lot of people, and sorry to some friends, because some of you listening, your sunrise is at like 4 o'clock in the morning during the summer. So
Yep.
sorry, friends.
Hmm.
But most of the time I will end up and tell someone, get out in the early morning, right? Get out before UV A rise, which is when the sun, is between 10 and 30 degrees. But that has benefit too. So the UVA has, again, this alpha MSH. It has a thyroid activation. So people that, such as myself, that had Hashimoto's and thyroid issues, really getting that early morning light, getting that UVA light helps with that. Any type of, autoimmune is going to benefit from these early mornings. But midday, like you said, there's a lot of benefit to UVB. But you also want these earlier, especially the UVA, because that's kind of like the precursor, if you will, to being able to tolerate, right? It ends up, and the way that the skin responds to the sunlight later in the day, it makes a little bit more tolerable. Now, we are not we are not superhuman, no matter how much we end up and practice the circadian side of things. We can still burn.
Yeah.
If we're out there
Yeah.
for too long, I don't care if you are. I spent 2.5 years carnivore, and you'll hear a lot of it in that dietary camp world of, I don't burn anymore. I got rid of seed oils and I got rid of vegetables and I don't burn. Well, if you're out there long enough, your potential, especially if the UV index is 10, is to burn. If you
Right.
are, at the beach or at the lake or wherever you're at, and you're getting that reflection off of, maybe it's the white sand or maybe it's the water, you have a potential to burn. So, still practicing smart midday sun exposure. It does help with the insulin sensitivity. It does have, that impact on our biology as far as the fat burning goes also. Um, Go ahead.
So, okay, so I'm gonna interrupt you, and let's
Hmm.
let's throw in sunglasses and um, why that's blocking the UV, and it's actually doing more harm than people think good, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I'm gonna let you go on that topic.
Yeah. So the sunglasses end up, and basically they're the same as blue blockers, right? In
Right.
the biohacking world, you end up and you hear a lot about the the orange or the red, or even the yellow for that aspect. Sunglasses block the key metabolic and hormone signals that the body end up and depend on. So when we are wearing sunglasses and they're filtering this light, it's actually doing more harm to our body than it is benefit, because
Right.
our eyes, again, are that light signal, right? The retina is contains the little receptors, just like our skin has receptors, but it has to be able to detect this light signals to the hypothalamus of the different time. And I've done a circadian masterclass, and one of my graphics in that, it looks like a barcode, if you will. And so as the sun is coming up, midday is basically, we have all, let me end up and pause and say, I understand the aspect. We have all rays of light, right? We don't, in nature, we don't single out. So when I say sunrise is predominantly red light, it is higher in the red wavelengths, just like midday is higher in the blue. Not to say that we don't have the red, we don't have the sharp peaks of artificial light. So when you are under like artificial fluorescent lights, LED lights, you get these sharp peaks in blue, you get them in green. Incandescent's a little bit more balanced, but anyway, that's artificial lighting. So, but your body has these receptors where it needs to be able to detect. So things like leptin signaling, metabolic rate, appetite, hormone production, sleep and wake cycles. All of this is dependent on the red, the blue, the UVA, UVB, all of these. That doesn't matter season perspective. So it's not just in summer, but you do see more people in summer wearing sunglasses unless there's somewhere that it snows and you're getting this, reflection. But the sunglasses block and distort that information. So it does really disrupt the leptin pathway when you're supposed to be receiving or getting this signal. Again, going out for sunrise, going out for UVA, and your body is supposed to boost that dopamine, right, to provide your body with motivation and energy. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, I just end up and get so tired midday. I'm so exhausted that I need a nap
Yes.
after I eat lunch. Because you're not activating these pathways. You're not activating that alpha MSH, which suppresses the appetite. So then you're snacking, or you're reaching for a cup of coffee, or a candy bar in the afternoon. You're reaching for something. So if you can reset the circadian and the metabolic clock, you're going to have benefit. But again, wearing sunglasses prevents that. It increases hunger. It creates a sluggish metabolism. And for some, it can even end up and cause fat storage, despite how clean they eat. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, I eat clean. Okay, but what are you doing as your foundation? What are you doing for your light routine? What are you doing for your parasympathetic routine? That all, plays a role in it. Because if you are someone, now, let me stop and say, there is a time for sunglasses. I will end up and go into that. But when you're wearing sunglasses or when you're wearing blue blockers all day long, you're dimming and distorting the intensity of light. The color of light is confusing the body's internal clock to where you're disrupting that circadian rhythm. You're having poor thyroid output. You're suppressing that melatonin recycling during the day. It matters too. Your body ends up and has all of these mechanisms that end up and take place. So your mood is going to dip. That's where people will end up and actually even be depressed in the summertime. You see it more in wintertime with seasonal affect, but some people that, end up and get very moody or very agitated during summer, it's not necessarily the heat. It's because the eyes aren't receiving this light signal. And so the mitochondria are confused.
So, hold on a second, because I
Mhm.
just seen somebody join over on my Instagram.
Mhm.
I want you to pause for a moment and I want you to talk about sunscreen. This is specifically for the person that joined on Instagram just now. So, um, my best friend. So, because her and I had this conversation yesterday, I think it was, because she had skin cancer pre cut off, pre. And I was explaining to her what type of sunscreen she should be using because of that. So I know you know a lot more on that subject. And can you tell her over here on Instagram for me?
So sunscreen is kind of like what I just got through saying with the sunglasses. Your skin has these light receptors as well. And so anytime you are covering it in chemicals, you're blocking that UV, you're blocking that infrared light, it shuts down these key hormone and metabolic pathways. Your body ends up and depends on that, especially in summertime, because you are UVA, we've kind of beat this to a dead bush, but to briefly recap, your eyes, your skin sense light. You end up and you have all of these sites or all of these cells, neuroendocrine cells in the skin that respond to the UVA. It stimulates the alpha MSH for fat burning, appetite. The UVB triggers vitamin D production, supports the immune function. A lot of people with autoimmune or chronic health conditions also end up and have low vitamin D levels. The infrared light, so wearing sunscreen and blocking these receptors also end up and oh, I got shit popping up on my screen. Stuff. Sorry. Um, all of a sudden it was popping up some notification. But anyway,
Wait, I didn't go beep. Okay, go ahead.
right. Well, welcome to real life here, friends. The infrared light, it ends up and it supports that mitochondria and the melatonin recycling. Sunscreen blocks these, which means no signal, no hormone, no light, no metabolic or no light metabolic confusion. And it just ends up and creates these whole pathways. So the UVA has to hit the skin. It triggers the alpha MSH. The alpha MSH travels to the brain, binds with the MC4 receptors, tells the hypothalamus, hey, we have energy, right? Increase metabolism, repair our appetite. If you block the UVA with sunscreen, the alpha MSH release plummets. It downregulates. Your brain never ends up and gets the signal. You end up and you hold on to the fat reserves because the body doesn't end up and know that, hey, we have energy in our, midsection, our thighs, our butts, our hips. We need to end up and consume more. So then we end up and we eat more, right? And we may not end up and eat the right foods. We may not eat in season. But vitamin D isn't just a vitamin, right? It's technically a hormone. And if we don't get the UV light in the skin, we don't end up and get that conversion of cholesterol. Vitamin D helps with regulating insulin, thyroid, sex hormones. You and I, before we just jumped on this, had a discussion. Immune function. So the exposure, the UVB exposure on the skin is the only natural way to make it. Sunscreen blocks 99% of the vitamin D production. So no UVB, no vitamin D. Increase of blood sugar issues, thyroid issues, low testosterone, estrogen imbalance, fatigue, craving, mood, the list goes on. What can you do to end up and decrease that toxic load? Look for a nanoparticle of zinc oxide, something that is a clean option that doesn't end up and have chemicals, doesn't end up and contain a lot of the endocrine disruptors, the oxybenzoins, the whatever the heck it's called, all the disruptors that are in your traditional box store chemical laden sunscreens. Because one, your skin is your largest organ. It ends up and it absorbs what you put on topically. But so not only is it blocking, but it is preventing that, and it's absorbing that into the system. The other thing that you can do, just like I've been talking about, going out for sunrise, going out for UVA, building up this solar callus gradually. If you are someone that has had, obviously, let me end up and give the whole disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I am not a doctor or dermatologist. So use sun exposure wisely. Get morning sun exposure, build that solar callus. If it is midday, you have these higher intensity of light, use shade, clothing, timing, instead of these chemical barriers. If you have to have extended exposure, then that's where looking at, again, these nano zinc oxide based products, eating a food that is rich in polyphenols and structured water is going to increase this internal production as well, and help prevent that sun damage. So like I said, there are things on that side. The sunscreen's not just blocking your body from getting a sunburn, but it's blocking a lot of these signals that your body ends up and needs. So there are a few things that, like I said, that you can end up and do. Just do it wisely. There's a couple different apps. My favorite app is the My Circadian app. You can look and see, what is your UV index. You can log a sun session. It goes off of your Fitzpatrick, so your skin color, your skin type, and it will help you create that safe sun exposure as you're building this callus. The other one is also a D-Minder app. Like I said, the my Circadian app is a little bit more well-rounded, more versed in regards of everything that it provides. So you're getting more information on it. But yeah, end up and really looking at things from that perspective. Again, taking breaks, right? Even if you're someone that works in an office, taking those light breaks through the day, it doesn't take much to help build this solar callus. You just got to be consistent with it.
Right. Well, and I know working out on the property, um, I mean, I mowed for hours and hours and hours for 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a hat on.
Yeah.
I had a hat on, and at some point, I did have glasses on, but that was because the dust, right, was blowing so much. But when I was out of that, sunglasses came right back off, right? Actually, they're safety glasses is what they are. Um, that I wear because this is raw land that I'm mowing on, and sometimes things go flying up in my face, and it's kind of nice to have my eyes protected. But by gosh, when I'm off of that area where I'm mowing, they're off. And so, what is the so I have built, right? I don't even know if you can see it. Let's see if we can. Oh, yeah, look. So you can see how much
Mm-hmm.
tan I've gotten, and I actually don't. My husband said to me the other day, "Wow, you're getting very dark." Um, so what's happening with a tan like that?
Increasing the melanin in the skin. I'll end up with, I'll give you a short answer for that. All
That's not
right.
what I was after. It was leading you down a path and you weren't biting.
They don't want my long-winded answers. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, they do.
But that's a good segue to also say, if you are watching on YouTube or Instagram, or I know we also have people over there on Twitch, feel free to end up and post a question. If my answers are, or my conversation is in striking any question,
Yeah,
definitely end up and put that. I know we also got people over on Facebook, so um, I was kind of being smart there. But anyway,
she
what is
was.
happening when we end up when we tan? Tanning is your body's adaptive response to light, right?
Yeah,
It's not just about aesthetics and going to a tanning bed, right? Those can actually be harmful. I won't even go into that tonight. Um, but it is the signal to create that biological change, create the melanin production. The melanin, for those, let me end up and bringing this clear back down to layman's terms, the skin pigmentation. Melanin is your body's natural sunscreen. So we end up when we produce these melanin sites, if you will, that end up and respond to the UVA, brings it up to the skin. We end up when we get the UVB, we end up when we create a tan, right? It all ends up and helps absorb and dissipate this UV radiation, if you will, as far as protecting our DNA. People with, again, going back to the app where you can set your Fitzpatrick, this is where, even adjusting that, people with more melanin in their skin can end up and be exposed a little bit longer, or it may take them a little bit longer to end up and create this vitamin D. So because it dissipates that radiation. But when we end up and have these interactions with the sunlight, yes, it generates heat, but it creates structured water. It supports the mitochondrial function. I mean, there's a lot that goes into, again, that alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, alpha MSH. It's easier. Um, when the hormone of when the alpha MSH is activated, I'm attempting to putting these all into terms that everyone can end up and understand. Alpha MSH, this hormone stimulates the melanin, but it also ends up and again stimulates the mood, libido, um, leptin sensitivity. So when we end up when we have this, it boosts it. That's also why people, again, feel better. They're happier in summer. It's not just because we end up when we have more sunlight, right? There's a lot of processes that are happening. More focus. People end up and are a little bit more driven during the summer. Those endorphins also are boosted. So natural pain relief. Less inflammation in the summertime than in the wintertime. We feel good chemicals, right, are better. There's, like I said, there's a lot when we end up when we are getting tan and we're boosting that melanin, um, that is happening. Tanning, when we're tan, the light's hitting the skin, the mitochondria are activated, that skin to brain is signaled. So there's a lot of protection as well as interaction and integration that our body ends up with the different processes of not only producing vitamin D, but dopamine, endorphins, leptin sensitivity. Um, yeah, the list goes on. It's not just cosmetic. It's not just to make you look pretty in a swimsuit.
Yeah. Sorry, I had. So I'm sitting here, I'm listening, and all of a sudden a dirt dauber literally just flew by my head. And it
But
was
again,
like, that was
well,
not cool.
again, it's life, right? This
Yeah.
is what happens,
It's over
right?
here. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's he just crawled up the shit. There he is. Ooh. 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 Real life. Real life.
Mm, too funny.
I know,
But yeah,
right?
does
They're
anyone?
getting a show tonight, aren't they? How funny. Let's see if I have any questions over here. No, but my best friend's still hanging on listening, so there's that.
Hey, well, if she has any questions, feel free to jump in because we've kind of gone all routes. So, uh, in regards of why summer is more than just sitting on a beach at the lake and
Well, and I think too that, like you said, there's an energy. There is, I know in traditional Chinese medicine, summer is governed by the fire element,
mhm,
and that kind of symbolizes joy, connection, and vitality. And aligning the rhythm supports emotional clarity and energetic balance. That's like you said, that's why we are like, we get together with family and friends, we have cookouts, you go to the lake, you go to the beach, you go to, we're doing activities, things like that. And that's that energetic and spiritual alignment that's naturally happening, because of the solstice, right?
mhm, mhm,
We're able to enjoy that. But there is also a pause to it, right? It's a lot of heat some in certain regions, and so that's also a signal to kind of reset. I when do I go outside in the middle of the day to do some physical hard activity, or do I wait, right?
yeah,
This weekend, or past 4 days, we got up early and we were out on the property early before that heat set in too. So there's some things around that, but overall, I just think that, summer is such a neat time of of things are growing, and things are, we've had baby deer at our feeder, and it's just been kind of fun to watch nature in its full bloom, um happening. And I'm sure, well, and the other thing too, so we dug a my husband dug a trench because we're putting electric in the building that we had delivered. And I went out and I covered the trench back with dirt with the shovel. But there were periods where some of the clumps were pretty hard. And It was easier for me to pick the clumps up and crumble them, but I knew in touching the dirt that that was in essence grounding for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I
Yep.
was getting that, like when you're out there and you're touching the plants and you're planting them and your 500 bazillion tomato
Tomatoes.
plants that that you have growing right now,
Right.
that yeah. So that counts. Like people don't even realize that I may not be barefoot, which I was not barefoot out on the property with the shovel in my hand, but my hands were in the dirt. So
Mm-hmm.
I got that benefit. So there's a whole level, that's a whole nother subject line, um but that's what's happening this time of year for people. They're planting things, their hands are in the dirt, they're,
Yep.
growing
Well,
stuff.
yeah, absolutely. And this is why, it's not just diet alone. Diet's
Right.
only one piece. Why light ends up and makes a difference when it drives your metabolism. So, most people end up and are just looking at, give me a macro, give me a meal plan, give me, the latest potion or peptide, if you will, as far as what I can end up and drink and consume or pop. And I've seen some of the cases, and I again, I'm not going to end up and go on that soapbox, but anyway, the truth is, no one ends up and talks about the ability to burn fat, regulate your hunger, balance your hormones, and it does end up and all start with light. It's not food. Summer's the prime time. Start with it now. Winter will be a lot easier when your skin, your eyes are all activated by these light receptors. That does include eating seasonal carbs. Sorry, carnivores. Eat your seasonal carbs. You will burn, more fat. You will store or burn energy efficiently. So being active, social, all of that ends up and makes a difference. Don't recap this whole thing, right? Don't wear your sunglasses. It blocks the UVA. You end up, you need those light signals in your eyes. Don't use sunscreen um, on your skin because it prevents the vitamin D synthesis. This is the time of season where we need to end up and produce that because many of us, sorry, friends, many of us end up and lose that come wintertime. Some of us more months than many. A lot of you in the South end up and I think lose it maybe only 4 days. Um,
Right?
and I end up and I lose it like 3 months. So um, we end up when we lose that ability, the melanin production, the vitamin D. So that whole side of things. Indoor light is not enough. It is too weak. Artificial lights do not end up and activate the brain and these control centers that we end up we need, such as the hypothalamus, the pineal gland to produce that melatonin. So making sure that you are actually getting natural light, getting those signals, and realize that your body doesn't necessarily need a new diet or the next thing to do for 30 days, 60 days, or spend hundreds of dollars a month. That
Right.
you can lead with light, the hormones will listen, and your metabolism will respond and do what it needs to do.
So I thought that was interesting just to throw in a study. But extended daylight helps reinforce your body's internal clock, improving sleep quality and energy regulation. A study tracking over 85,000 people found that exposure to blue rich light at night, meaning screens and LEDs, right? Your TV, your phone, um, your lights in the house disrupt circadian rhythms and increased the risk of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And that is a quote from a study.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, it is really important to have this optimization of the circadian rhythm. It is for Becky and I non negotiables, period.
It's a foundational aspect.
Yes.
So yeah, when we end up, I can be a nerd and go down different, sun exposure and the effects of human health, regulation of adipose tissue, leptin. I mean, there are so many studies when you end up and you start to dig into it the depletion of these alpha MSH. I mean, it's just what light and its role plays. That's one of the reasons, again, why I got certified in quantum circadian biology, is because it plays such a pivotal role in our body and our supporting systems that it, again, it's not just food, right? It, you have to end up and look at this. And so no one, or not many, are talking about it. You see more starting to come around to, you know, how light is playing a role, and it's not just food, but those that are sitting in the dietary camps are a lot of the loud voices, and it's not always about just pushing more fasting or pushing more elimination. It's not necessarily what your body may need. You may end up in need to create some of these other pathways.
Well, and if this intrigues you, um, we have in the BNC community a lot of different meetings um, that we talk about this kind of these very subjects, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the community. So if we have really piqued your interest, we it do invite you to join. Here, let me bring up. There we go.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there we go. The BNC community. You can join us. How many meetings do we have a week?
I think
I
like
know.
10 plus.
10 plus. We have a social every day, meaning it's not coach led. It is just for the members to get on and just have social time and just talk and like-minded people. And we're not talking about politics here. We're talking about just a healthy aspect of life and what are you doing and this is what I'm doing and and the weather was this today. And I mean, we've heard some fun conversations in the
Mm.
social, even down to AI. Like,
Yeah,
there's a whole
right.
conversation around AI that I said to Becky one day. I said, "Let's count how many times they say that." So, but a lot of information out there. We don't subscribe to one dogmatic way of eating. Period.
Okay.
We have people in our BNC community that all eat different. So, and nobody shames you for
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, you're not this, how dare you? We're going to shame you and send you out the door. That doesn't happen in the BNC community, which one of the things I absolutely love coaching alongside Becky is that we do have a mental health. If you guys have seen Coach Sly, and we'll probably have her back on. We're going to do more roundtables with her. Um, and she has a mental health meeting that is always fascinating. So the if you're intrigued, like I said, with any of the things we talked about summer today, you we can dig way in deep. And you can ask specific questions. I mean, Becky does have a master class that, how many hours is it?
2.5.
2.5 hours, and I've sat through it several times, and I'll tell you what, to be honest, I joke with her, I learn something every time because my brain picks up something different each time, right? It's like, "Oh, uh, wait a minute, back up. Let's talk about that for a moment." And so it's kind of interesting, and that's why earlier I said, "Oh, look at my tan," and she was a smart aleck about it, but she knew what I wanted her to say. So, but that's what happens when you're best friends and you co-host and you coach in a community, and we just do all the things. We have fun, um, but and fun is part of it.
I like to end up and give you just the short answer because I know you. I know you. I know you end up and feed me with the inquisitive questions so that I end up and I go, because I am very passionate about
Yeah.
this whole side of things, and I've done a lot of studying and a lot of digging, and using it in clinical practice to help several hundred people. So when we end up when we talk about it, it's not just another, modality that we're looking at. It's something that we have end up and seen success with.
Right. And
Um,
I'm gonna throw this out there. One of the things that I learned early on from your master class was cracking the window in your vehicle as you drive.
yeah.
Now, yes, I wear glasses when I drive. I don't think it would be a good idea for me to take the glasses off, but I have skin exposed, and even that little crack is enough for that light code to get to my skin to help. So there's a little tip for everyone.
Yep, absolutely. It all ends
See,
up
I
and
do
makes a
listen.
difference. It all ends
I
up and
do
makes a
listen.
difference, no matter, how big or how small. It's about the consistency and
Yeah.
continuing to do better, be better than what we were yesterday. And that's the biggest thing, which is also
Yep.
why we created the 90-day challenge we did, is to help people with being consistent. And it's easier to be consistent in with something like this in the summertime than it is in wintertime. So
Absolutely. Well, that was fun. That was a fun subject. We could probably talk for several Mondays on that subject alone, but we'll come up with something different
mm,
next week for you.
absolutely. Or, if you are listening on any of the streaming platforms, and if this sparks any curiosity and you want us to do a topic specific, in regards to, something that was spoke about tonight, feel free to end up and put that in the comments, put it in, uh, what do I want to say? The chat. I'm thinking of Instagram. It's like, well, I guess that would be the comments, but feel free to put it in there and we can expand on it for you. So anytime you have anything, just post it there. We do end up and read it, and we wish you all to have a wonderful night.
And we will see you next Monday evening, 7 p.m. Central. Thank you guys so much for watching. We do appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you next week.